Welcome to the Lemonade Stand Stories podcast. Tune in every Thursday as we share inspirational stories from the world's greatest creators, entrepreneurs, and go-getters about how they've turned life's lemons into lemonade. And now, here's this week's host, the CEO of Lemonade Stand, Derek Miner.
Well, so glad to be here with Trevor Larson, who is the CEO and founder of Nectar HR. Really excited to hear about your journey. Welcome to the Lemonade Stand Stories podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Really appreciate it, Derek.
Absolutely. Well, we're just going to jump in, have a conversation, really talk more than anything about you've told stories about your journey, about how you got started. I loved, and I've heard, the story from duct tape wallets getting started to painting citrus trees.
I forgot those were in the thing that I said.
to what's led you now to running a super successful SaaS company here in Utah. And genuinely appreciate your time coming in and really helping inspire the rising generation, those who are, man, can I do this? And I think there's points in your journey where you can really inspire. But let's kick it off. Tell us a little bit about. And I love also that we talked and you mentioned that we love the definition of an entrepreneur, but you call it trailblazer. Mm-hmm. Tell me about that.
I don't know why, but I've never liked the term entrepreneur for some reason. I don't know why. I've just always been like that, I guess. But trailblazer just makes way more sense to me because it's like I was pre-dental, which I'm sure you kind of heard. And so I was going on that track and I have mad respect for people going into the medical field or whatever it is, right, that requires a ton of grind and a ton of years before you're actually getting a real paycheck and all this debt. But with them, they have this clear path. It's really hard, but there's people that have kind of built that path for them, and they have all the materials and the courses and the teachers to get there. And so they know if they follow that path where their destination is. But for entrepreneurs or trailblazers, it's you're building the path as you go. Yeah. Right. And you have to, there is no textbook on how to do it. You just have to go figure it out.
Right.
And so I've always liked that term a lot better.
Yeah, I love that idea of trailblazing, right? There is no trail. Let's figure this out. Mm-hmm. But really, to be a trailblazer, you have to have a vision, right? I like thinking about, because people talk about mission or vision, mm-hmm. and kind of synonymously, right? But a vision is hey, speaking about trailblazing, I love hiking mountains and the beautiful Wasatch Front here. But you think about a vision is really, hey, we're going to the top of the mountain. The mission is how we get there, right? Mm-hmm. Tell us about kind of your life's mission and how you ended up where you're at right now.
Yeah, that's a really loaded question. For me, I've always just loved to build or create things or especially from scratch. How do we create value in the world, mm-hmm. right? And the journey that I've been on to get to where I'm at with Nectar has been littered with little stories of how I've slowly built value that people end up caring about and paying for. Mm-hmm. And I feel you can kind of make your own dent in the universe. And it reminds me of there's that dude from I can't remember when, it's been a decade or two, where he did the paperclip bigger, better challenge where, what I'm talking about? Yeah. He started with the paperclip and he traded it for, I can't remember what, a pen, and he kept trading until he had a house. Right. Right. And I feel my journey, I'm not having the house yet in that analogy, but it feels I started really small, just started somewhere. And my mind has always been okay, how do we get bigger and better? How do we build something more scalable and add more value in the world? And so this shift from the duct tape wallet days, obviously I was sixth grade or whatever, but the car detailing more recently, in the last 6 or 7 years, to Perk Now, which was kind of our first software company. And it's actually the same entity as Nectar. We ended up having a big pivot 2 years ago to where we are now. It's just been this journey of okay, how do we add more value? How do we create more a machine that's more scalable? And that just gets me excited. I'm just kind of a builder. I like to build things and I like to build people, and I'm kind of a people person. So it's fun to create this team of awesome individuals and drive towards something together,
Yeah, man, I love that. There is so much to unpack in that. When you talk about being a creator, right? I think honestly, our purpose and being here is to design and create. Why? For ourselves? No, really to bless and help others. So as you've gone through this journey, especially kind of your journey to product market fit with where you're at and the pivot and things like that, I'd love to hear a little bit more about that. Some of these micro interactions that ended up being really critical points for you and those pivot points for you as a business that all of a sudden you started to see, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so I mean, I moved up here back in 2014 for school. I was going to UVU, planning to go to dental school, and most of my friends were working at like call centers, right? And I have ADHD. That sounded terrible. It sounded really soul-sucking, and I had a little bit of car detailing experience. So I moved up here, and I'm like, it'd be fun to just start from scratch. I don't know anyone up here besides just a few friends. What if I started a little business from scratch? I could have a lot of flexibility in my schedule for school and just like learn how to like build something, right? And it wasn't going well at all until like the end of summer. I was able to kind of sneak my way or weasel my way into Vivint as an employee perk, right? And so instead of like going door to door or offering this mobile car detailing service to like residential areas, it was more of like a kind of commercial type setup where Vivint was promoting this service called Fresh Finish to all their employees, and in return I would offer a discount, come on site and do it while people were at the office. That's right? Awesome. So that was exciting because the day I got into Vivint, it was like my phone starts blowing up. They sent out this email to 3,000 employees. All summer I'd gotten like 1 or 2 detailing gigs, and now it was like I had like my next month booked already.
That's awesome.
And I'm like, I'm gonna be rich. This is amazing. You know, kind of that feeling, which wasn't nearly the case. But I was still focused on dental school, and this started growing organically though, because Qualtrics next door heard about it, and they reached out. So I started doing it for them. Eventually doing all of Ryan Smith's cool cars, which was fun. And then the head of business dev at Qualtrics, he kept trying to recruit me as I would detail his car as an SDR.
You're doing a great job there.
I guess so. And he's like, this guy's scrappy. Like, he's got all these other companies on. Like, he could be really good in sales, like as an SDR. And so I was flattered. He gave me a tour of the company. And this was like, my world was open to software, the software industry, right? Like, I had no idea what it was. Being from Mesa, Arizona, it's like that doesn't really exist there, right?
Yeah. And you were detailing cars out in the parking lot.
Yeah, just out in the parking lot, hands and knees. I had a 2001 Honda Civic on its last leg, and I had to go buy a generator and put it in the back seat. And
awesome.
I still have, like, my friends still give me a hard time because, like, that thing always smelled like gas. Like, we could never get the scent of gas out of that car because it's kind of my work truck, you know?
Yeah. So I love that. You're out in the parking lot, and now all of a sudden you're inside Qualtrics, taking a tour of the building.
Yeah, they, like, hooked me up with all this, like, Qualtrics swag and stuff, which was cool. Got a tour of the building, and I walk in there, and I see this, like, open floor plan, people dialing and slinging, and then you have like dogs walking around. You got like the Coca-Cola machine with like any flavor of like beverage you want, all the snacks, like shuffleboard tables, and I was just like, what is this? Like, this isn't work, this isn't business. And it was like my first introduction into like the SaaS world, and I loved it. I was so intrigued by it that it felt right to like, let's get my feet wet here and see what this software stuff is about. So that's when I jumped on as an SDR. Only lasted like 6 or 7 months.
Yeah, because that's tough.
It's tough.
That's a tough gig.
It's a tough gig, especially when I was still planning on going to dental school, you know? So to me, it's like, if you're going to be an SDR and grind it out, like, you want to have a career as an AE or in sales. And so that wasn't where I was headed. And then I also, honestly, I just kept feeling like I'm building Ryan Smith's dream right now. Like, I'm just building his dream, and I kind of miss like detailing cars, even though I had a buddy that's my now partner. He was still running that. I miss like doing my own thing, really.
That's awesome. So your car detailing partner is your business partner for Nectar,
and he's actually a buddy from growing up.
Yeah. Oh, that's very cool. So as you think about, and I'm super curious about what, and we're going to call it trailblazers because I love that. What traits do the best trailblazers possess?
That's a really good question. I think trailblazers possess, I think they're actually a little bit crazy. There's a few screws that have to be loose, I think, in order for you to want to be a trailblazer and to survive as one, because we as humans we hate uncertainty. We're wired to not like uncertainty. We want security. Yeah. And trailblazers don't have that. Like they like thrive in uncertainty. They love and kind of seek after uncertainty. They're kind of like the explorers of old a little bit, right? You gotta be like a little bit like the Lewis and Clarks of the world, or like the Ernest Shackletons.
Love that. Shackleton's amazing.
Yeah, I just read that book over the break.
Did you?
Endurance, and like blown away. And talk about a trailblazer. Like I think of him and his qualities, and I'm like, that's a true trailblazer. You got to have leadership ability, be able to communicate well with people, I think. You've got to be able to kind of see the vision and identify trends in the future, I think, as well. But really it just comes down to the grit and the persistence and like anti-fragility of it all, because you're just going to get thrown through way more than you ever imagine, and everything that could go wrong will go wrong. Right. And you've got to somehow like keep the faith, keep persistent, and just steady throughout, and kind of stay the course. So
yeah, no, that's awesome. When you talk about Shackleton, perhaps one of my favorite business books of all time, even though it has nothing to do with business. Right. But it talks about a team and how to put personalities and people in the right roles doing the right things for survival, right? And as you talk about going in and journeying into the unknown, and knowing where you've been too. Here you get your software up, ready to launch, and all of a sudden a pandemic hits, right? Tell us how you navigated that, and some of the tough decisions you had to make, and real conversations with team and with clients that perhaps you've signed up. Walk us through that journey and how you did that.
For sure. Yeah, that was crazy. So yeah, March 2020, we had just launched Nectar. We made a massive pivot early, like January of 2020 to Nectar, which is a modern employee recognition and rewards platform. Very different from what we were doing before. So it's new brand new product. And then, 3 months later, the world shuts down.
Right.
And the product was still in like MVP mode. Like there wasn't a whole lot to it. It was bare bone. We weren't getting a ton of traction at the time. And we also had, we'd grown the team. We'd raised a little bit of funding from some angels within the last year. And so we'd kind of grown the team, but no product market fit, not a lot of traction, like months without sales, right?
Wow. And
so then the world shuts down. That was either March 12th or 13th, I want to say. And I just remember like hearing that, I think it was the NBA was like, we're done for the season.
Yeah.
And then it was like Disneyland closed like within the next
fast.
hour. Yeah. And all of a sudden everything was shut down, and it was like such a paradigm shift. Like this has never, ever happened in anyone's lifetime. Right. And for us, instantly after that, like within an hour or two, our sales team's getting messages from people in the pipeline that had either just closed or were about to close. They're like, hey, we got to freeze. We're pausing. And it happened so fast. Yeah. Like in a matter of hours, our entire pipeline froze. And it was like, I just remember that day, like sitting there with my co-founders, and we're like, what do we do? Like we can't have all of this overhead when nobody's going to be doing, marketing and sales isn't going to be working for a while. We don't know how long, right? Like these budgets are going to be frozen. But basically we kind of sat down and we're like, okay, what can we control? Like there's so much right now that we can't control, but what can we control, and how can we kind of use this to our advantage? And so we knew what table stakes we were missing in the product and what our sales inhibitors were. That was all well documented. We're like, we're going to go really hard in product for at least the next couple months and just see how long this lasts. And so we went heads down and worked heavily on product. And we're like, nobody knows our brand. We just launched it. Like, how do we like go hard on brand and like prepare marketing for when everything really starts function again? Because to date we were doing all outbound and it wasn't very effective. We had zero inbound motion. So we're like, okay, we're going to hop on these review sites like G2 and Capterra. Let's get a couple hundred reviews from our users, start doing a little bit of like paid ads through there and see what happens. And sure enough, like April, May, we start getting inbound leads. And one of them, like, this was like April, like right after it hit, was like TED Talks.
Wow.
Reached out as an inbound lead, and we were like freaking out because it was like a huge organization, like really good brand,
and
but we were still month? Nothing, right? This was in like this was April or May, like right after this happened, right? And so it was cool because we're thinking we're a little bit behind from some of our competitors from like just all around, but especially from a product perspective. But it's like they're getting paused and like their sales are paused too, so we can use this time to really catch up in the race, right? And I feel like coming out of, I mean, it's hard to say when coming out of the pandemic was, because it's still kind of happening 2 years later, right? But it felt like towards the end of summer, people were starting to buy software again. But all of a sudden, there was a spotlight shining on our category because everyone's working remote. And they're like, how do we recognize people in a remote setting? How do we build a connected and engaged workforce when people are working from everywhere? And that's not normal. We're not used to this. And so all of a sudden, like inbound leads started just going crazy, and the demand for our type of product has just skyrocketed. So in a way, it was kind of, we were benefactors of the pandemic for sure.
Yeah. I love what you mentioned, Trevor. There's so many people that just focus so heavily on everything that's going on around them that it just completely stops any traction. But you said, what can we do? What are we going to focus on to really take things to the next level? Describe, if you would, what this was like amongst your team when all of a sudden you started to see these little glimpses of traction and interest. And again, your timing was uncanny, right? With everyone moving remote. Now, how do we stay connected? And I love that as part of, one of your core, offerings is this connectedness in a world where we are so connected. But now, I'm connected on my device at home, but yet I feel so disconnected. So a couple questions there. What was it like, kind of the feeling amongst the team from going from, oh my gosh, what are we going to do, to now we're onto something? Describe that, and then how that connectedness happened, not only amongst your team, but also stories that you heard from some of your clients.
Yeah, that's a good question. So yeah, it's just this very unique feeling when all of a sudden, you've, for the last couple years really, you've been doing an outbound motion. That's all you ever knew. Like, two of the co-founders were SDRs, one Qualtrics, one at Bamboo HR, and it just was never super effective. But all of a sudden, especially after the pandemic, when we're all kind of freaking out, we don't know what's going to happen. Like, starting to get this inbound traction of, 20 leads a month inbound demos being booked, to 30 to 40.
So awesome.
And in the middle of like everything that's happening in 2020, and from like really cool brands, like I was saying, we're starting to come through. And yeah, it was just like, whoa, like we're onto something. And this is actually a blessing in disguise. Like, the lockdown and everything and the pandemic was really scary at first, but we started to realize, like, whoa, if we position ourselves the right way and we build the product in the right way, like, this remote work thing might be a forever thing.
Yeah.
And we might be in a really interesting spot. And you start building this momentum that we'd never really felt before. And there's just no better feeling than like you're headed towards product market fit and finding, because it's one of the most elusive things in business, right? It's the hardest thing to find. It's the only thing in the world that you want, but it's so elusive. When it starts happening, it is just the most amazing feeling. And it's kind of like growth is so slow, but then sudden, right?
Right.
Growth it's slow and then sudden. And it's that shift of like 1 million inputs are coming out. The outputs of those 1 million inputs are so small at the beginning. And then before you know it, the dynamic shifts to where it's like small inputs start equaling big outputs. And that's when things kind of take off. It's really, really exciting.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And then the second part of that question was just connectedness with customers and clients. Like, we've been able to serve customers like Major League Baseball, MLB, their whole org uses Nectar.
Wow.
Which is really exciting. And
congrats. That's so awesome.
Yeah, appreciate it. That was cool. Like, calling my dad that day. So we were big baseball fans. I played in high school. And so like calling my dad, I'm like, the MLB just signed, like, craziest feeling. And just hearing the stories from customers on how they've been able to maintain or create this remote work culture where people are feeling valued still, they're not feeling left out, feeling connected and appreciated, is just, it feels like we're making an impact, which is really exciting for us.
That's awesome. And I think, as you talk about culture, what's your definition of culture?
Definition of culture, man, I should probably have that one like in my back pocket, but I don't. But I think it's kind of the collection of like values and beliefs, and then the way that people work together, and also just like the principles with which you work. So I think you see like Google, for example, they have just very few like simple rules and heuristics that they use, and it's like, here are your guardrails, and like go do, like, here's the vision, here are the guardrails, go make it happen. Here's a ton of autonomy. We're not going to micromanage anyone, and that's what really drives innovation and gets people excited. So I think building a culture, like if you don't set those principles, they're going to kind of set themselves in a way, right? Yeah,
absolutely. Having it be, it will naturally emerge, right? Or you can be really deliberate about what you want it to be and how you want it to be, most importantly. So how would you describe your current company culture, or around creating kind of, or what would you love to have in your organization in Nectar?
Yeah, that's a good one. For us, like we're just big believers that people are your biggest competitive advantage. And I did a post on LinkedIn. I
saw that about 5 days ago. Isn't that right? I love
that.
And
it like hit a nerve like I hadn't seen on any of my LinkedIn posts where, it's like your people and your culture are like your organization's fingerprint, right? Yeah. It's the only thing that can't be copied. Like competitors are going to copy your product. Yep. They're going to copy your processes. Every new feature that you roll out, they can just go copy. Yep. But people are like truly force multipliers. So if you can recruit the best talent and push them towards like this mission and give them autonomy on how they want to work, when they want to work, where they want to work, it's amazing what people can come up with. So for us, like we have our employee handbook is in this Notion document. We use Notion, and all it is use your best judgment.
I love it.
Right?
That's awesome.
Yeah. So like for us, we've had people come on the team and like, we're like, yeah, you can work from anywhere. You can come in, take whatever time off you want, go on trips, go on vacations, whatever. But I've had multiple team members message me like, hey, sorry I haven't been in the office for 5 days. Like I promise I'm working from home, or I'm working from over, we're in Idaho this weekend or whatever. And I'm like, I always send them a link to the handbook, and I'm like, use your best judgment. Like we don't care. You don't need to feel like you have to constantly tell me that you're working. Like I think the best litmus test is to hire people that are their biggest critics. Because I think as a leader, like you're not somebody's critic, or you shouldn't be. Like you need to hire people that are their own biggest critics, and they're going to work as hard as they can, and they're going to perform, and you don't have to kind of oversee everything, right?
That's awesome. When you talk about, I love, that's probably one of my favorite handbooks I've ever heard, right? Hey, it's one page. Actually, it's one sentence. That's fantastic, because I think what it does is it also exudes tremendous trust, right? Because trust in organizations takes lifetime to build, right? But can be lost instantly. And judgment, as you think about it, judgment really comes through experience, right? My dad used to always say, use good judgment. And through experience, you learn how to, but that's really hard to coach or train judgment. How have you found that?
Yeah, that's a question I haven't really thought of before. I think it's, for us, you can just, when you're interviewing people, you can just tell like what kind of person they are. Back to Ernest Shackleton with endurance, right? Within like 5 minutes, he would like say, all right, you're on the trip, or you're not, like really fast. And I don't feel like I have necessarily that ability, right? But I think you can just tell what quality of person this is when you interview them, and whether they have like good judgment to some extent. Yeah. And for us, like we have a lot of like interconnected like family members or brother-in-law, like stuff like that. So you kind of know what you're getting, and you're just able to kind of trust that they're going to do what's what's best for the business, but not like burn themselves out, right? They're going to be trustworthy. They're going to be honest, and they're going to work really hard, whether you're watching or not, right?
Yeah. And you must have an accountability system set up around that, right? Where you're checking in with team members. What does that look like?
We really don't. I mean, maybe we should. And like the culture part with Nectar, we're a team of 14 now, full time. Awesome. Beginning of last year, there was 5 of us, and there were times like way back when we sat down and we're like, here are our core values. We went through everything, and I honestly feel like we did it too early. We don't even remember those because it was before we had product market fit. It was like, it kind of felt like a waste of time, and that might be a hot take, but we are getting to that stage now, and just over holiday break where I'm like, okay, we need to sit down and like, let's talk about what our values are, and like the principles that we live by, and let's be a little more deliberate about culture. And now that I'm getting pulled out of like the roles and the hats that I've been wearing, I'm gonna have more time to dedicate towards being deliberate about our culture, because I realize like we're out there trying to build that for other companies,
right?
And so we need to really like nail it internally too.
Yeah.
So
and it's inspiring too that you've been able to come so far, kind of without that framework, because that's where a lot of people start. As you mentioned Shackleton, I think you've set that expectation early on, and this, I mean, truly a trailblazer starting a business. I think his initial ad was men wanted for hazardous journey, low wages, safe return doubtful, right? Inquire within. Yeah. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that is an entrepreneurial journey for sure. And he had over 700 people show up at his doorstep because he put his address down, and he wanted to meet all these people. And I think he ended up choosing 27 or 28. And what an inspiring story that is. But you think kind of throughout that entire experience, you get these little glimmers of hope that they would have, that literally is what kept them alive for nearly 2 years in the Antarctic without Gore-Tex, right? We're looking back at some of these journeys that we have over the last little while, but that's incredibly just such an inspiring journey. Tell us, how often do you speak to your customers?
Yeah, that's a good question too. As far as customers go, we're trying to do that more, right? Between me and like our head of product, we talk to customers like once or twice a month right now. We just hired a new head of marketing that will be starting soon, and him and I have talked a lot about setting up like more of a process, like post-sale, of like, okay, let's interview them, let's get their story, let's figure out like why they went with us, and doing better about being like more customer centric. I mean, everyone says they're customer centric, and we love our customers, but like talking to them more frequently and getting their feedback more often is definitely something I think is important. Yeah,
no question. And you'll find too, as we talked about inbound versus outbound, I think one of the best sources that I've seen, the very best run companies, is client referrals, right? And when you know and understand what they're trying to accomplish, how they're using your platform, can be tremendously insightful in terms of what you're trying to do. Have you ever run experiments at Nectar in terms of, think about it like a lab? Hey, if we try this, what happens? Have you ever had an experience and experiments, and what's worked well and what hasn't?
That's a good... I know we have, and I'm kind of blanking off the top of my head of like a specific one that we've run. I know I've done a bunch on the marketing side of just like testing out new ads and things. One thing that actually worked really well that we experimented on was something called eWebinar. And basically it allows you to do these pre-recorded webinars, but it has a live chat built into it.
Very cool.
And so we have this like widget at the bottom of our website that prompts them to do this like on-demand demo essentially. And so it's this pre-recorded demo. They sign up for when they want to watch it. And then they can like chat back and forth in real time with us. And that was something that we like, kind of a down in the weeds experiment that we did that ended up being like super fruitful. We've gotten like well over 1,000 like leads through there and closed a lot of deals, just because we're really big on allowing customers to self-educate. I feel like the B2B buying process is completely broken, B2B software. So for us, it's like, how can we allow them to self-educate as much as possible? And when they're ready, they're going to raise their hand and let us know when they want a demo, versus us like begging them to get a demo by giving them a gift card or having an SDR call them 100 times, right? So
That's really cool. And how do you find your clients are measuring success?
Yeah, the success measurement is mostly on usage, right? So we found that over like 85% of employees use Nectar month over month, right? And so we base it off of like how many shout outs, we call them shout outs, are happening in the social feed, right? How many like comments and likes, and also managers, how many managers are getting 100% recognition for their individual teams and their direct reports. And so that's currently how we do that. Down the road, we want to get more involved with like actual like retention metrics, right? And figuring out like how we've been able to impact retention and turnover too.
And what have you heard from some of your current customers that they rave about Nectar HR?
Yeah, I mean, I hear a lot of the good stuff. There's really not these types of systems in general, right? Even with our competitors, like they really are super impactful for a company's culture. And I mean, 2 out of 3 employees like don't feel adequately recognized for their work. Gallup did a survey on that. And that's crazy to me that 2 out of 3 people are spending the majority of their waking hours doing something and trying to contribute, but they don't feel like they're being seen, right? And so for us, like, it's so powerful to know that, 85% of the users in all of our like customer base are at least getting recognized every month and feeling seen and that they are actually contributing, right?
Yeah, that's so awesome. I think, as you think about what are some of the most important questions that team members, we call them team members, want to know, right? They want to know, how am I doing, right? And that feedback, that real-time feedback and perception is so critical and so important.
And I think how it's been broken is just, we see so many times these companies are trying to do this manually. Like somebody in HR is doing it internally. They're patching together different software, Slack, Excel spreadsheets. They're going to the store and buying gift cards for rewards. And then now in a remote world, they're like shipping those all over the place as well as swag. So it just gets messy, and it just creates so much friction for somebody to like recognize somebody else in a public setting, right?
Right.
And so removing that friction just makes it a lot easier and more accessible for people. So then they actually do it because people want to give a shout out to their coworker, right?
Yeah. And I love that recognition, that peer-to-peer recognition, giving those shout outs also provides that same kind of lift, right? When you start to see traction, like, oh, this is so awesome, but someone recognized actually what I've done as a result of that can provide just massive amounts of lift and confidence.
It can mean the world to people. Yeah, absolutely. I know I've felt that way as we've used it internally. Whenever I get like a unsolicited shout out from somebody, or unexpected, I guess is a better word for it. It's just like, wow, like that's awesome. Somebody is seeing like my contribution.
Right. And especially in a remote world too, right? Or even a hybrid. I think it'll probably always be like this.
Yeah. I think you're right.
And being able to have that recognition even though you are alone. What are some of the things that you're doing or you've seen companies do really well to help engage teams that are remote and bringing them together? Because it's one thing when you're in an office and you have the opportunity to see each other and engage and interact that way. But man, sometimes it's really hard, from a remote perspective. What have you seen that's worked?
Yeah, I've definitely kind of heard of. I interviewed a handful of remote companies even before the pandemic, actually. They were remote first, like Zapier's remote first, and Doist and some of those. And it was really interesting how they had chosen to be remote first. They had employees all over the globe, and they were just so deliberate about their culture and values and alignment. And it forced them to be better at communicating because that was really the only option to be successful. So I think communication and alignment is huge. As far as like tactical things, a lot of them will try to simulate these like water cooler chats. So they'll have like a channel on Slack to do that. Or some of them will have these bots that will actually like rotate through, and every week it'll like assign you to 2 random coworkers in the company, and it will have you guys hop on a Zoom and like ask these 3 questions this week to get to know them, right? And so that way you're kind of stirring the pot, so everyone's getting to know each other. You're forcing this forcing sounds like a bad term for it, but like this collaboration and people getting to know each other. And then those like remote first companies will do, almost all of them will do these biannual retreats somewhere in the world, like somewhere exotic, for like a whole week. So they'll pay for everybody to fly somewhere, and it's not all about work, right? They do a lot of cool activities. So I've heard of that happening quite a bit too, which is cool. And then you have that extra budget too, right? Because you're not paying for the office space or as much office space. And so you need to take advantage of that and try to build culture and help kind of create those relationships with that extra budget, I think.
No, I love that. So tell me, I'd love your take. Matthew May, who's an author and speaker, asks a really good question. He says, what one word do we want to own in the minds of our customers, employees, and partners? And what would you say is your one word as you think about, Google, you think about Google, you think search, right? You think Apple, you think different. You think Toyota, you think quality, just as a few examples. What's the one word for your customers, your employees, and partners?
Man, I'm split right now between two, so I'm just going to say two, if that's all right.
Awesome.
But I'd say appreciation, obviously, would be a huge one for us. Like, make sure people are feeling appreciated, because that's how they're going to do their best work.
Absolutely.
It's best for their mental health and their overall health, is feeling like they're contributing and feeling valued, right? And that's just been ingrained from us since we were hunters and gatherers, right? And then the other one that kind of goes along with that is trust. And that's kind of what the story I'm trying to tell other like companies and organizations is like, trust your people, like lean into trust. I know it hurts as leaders. It hurts sometimes to just totally give somebody autonomy on something. But if people feel trusted, they feel empowered. And when they feel empowered, they do incredible work.
Oh, that is so true. I love that word. Because just from my perspective, I think the deepest form of love, appreciation, commitment is all embodied in trust, right? Where you think about it, here's a way to think about trust. What does it feel like when you're not trusted, right? You're looking over your shoulder. You're always kind of in panic mode. Versus when you feel trusted, you're completely empowered to do your best work. So work where you want, go where you want, and because I know that I'm trusted.
On that trust spectrum, right? That's what's been, I think, hard for companies is in this remote setting. It's like it's forced them to like trust people to get work done, right? And I don't know, you just kind of look back to the like industrial age, where management styles were just very, very different.
Right.
And people were not trusted. They were almost like slave laborers in a way. But it seems like that's just trickled down through the generations until today. And I think this millennial generation is going to kind of destroy anything left of that by leaning into trust. But yeah, I think just leadership and management styles have always inherently not trusted people. And they've built systems and policies and everything as if people are just are dumb and not trustworthy. And I think the default setting needs to be trust. And if you do that, you'll be really surprised at what people will do for you and accomplish. Because in reality, you can buy somebody's time, but you can't buy their heart or their mind.
Oh, I love that.
And you need their heart and mind in order for really good work the best work to get done, right?
The best work. Yeah, that's right. Because when you have employees' hearts and minds and you're investing in them, you're recognizing them, that's a winning combination. So how do you, with this new context, how do you build and create trust?
I think for us, like one example was the employee handbook, like use your best judgment, right? Yeah. It's like, we literally trust you to do whatever it is you're going to do as far as what you're going to wear to the office, where you're going to work from, what days you're going to come in, like whether you're going to get back to customers in like a fast timeline. Like, yeah, we're going to try to nudge you to do your best work. But yeah, we even talked about today before I came over as a team, like we're kind of considering, I shouldn't say considering quite yet, but I think it'd be really cool to test out the 4-day work week. And that's another level of trust. And I think my prediction is in the next decade, that's going to be the default, is the 4-day work week, at least for knowledge-based workers. Because it's just, I mean, imagine the competitive advantage you have from a recruiting standpoint, from a retention standpoint, but also just people who on Saturdays they're waiting in line to get their car washed or going to get their oil change, doing all these chores and stuff on their weekends. Like, what if they had one day a week outside of the weekend to get everything done around the house and to relax and go do a hobby? Like, they can be more effective in those 4 hours, in those 4 days. I don't believe that time spent on something equals output anymore like it used to. Like factory workers, for example. In today's world, it's more, everything should be performance based, and people can work better in a shorter amount of time if they're really focused, right? So, so yeah, 4-day work week's a really interesting example of trusting employees, allowing them to work remote. We've kind of mentioned a little bit, and yeah, those were just kind of a few things I think.
Yeah,
I kind of had in mind.
No, that's awesome. Love the word trust. I think we could spend an entire time just talking about trust, how to build trust, how to win trust, and it's having your team feel that sense of ownership as well, right? Have you found ways that work around that and helping them feel as though they are they are owners of the company?
We don't have that like fleshed out as one of our values, like as we're kind of working through those, but that is one that we've talked about in the past, is like everyone's an owner, like owner's mentality type thing. And that's kind of how our people feel, because especially early on in a startup, right? You want a bunch of generalists. We don't want any people that specialize in anything. So we recruit builders, and that's why I think it's easy to tell, because I'm a builder. Like, I think I can kind of tell, like, okay, this person's a builder. They can like come in here and make stuff happen. Yeah.
And creating amazing, context for people to do their best work. Because again, I think building trust and creating systems where people love to show up and love to do their very best work is super important.
Ownership. Oh yeah. And you mentioned ownership. That's kind of where we were going with it, right? Ownership.
Exactly.
I think for us, like what we've seen with our people on the side of ownership is I really tried, whenever somebody brings me something or has a question, we try to say like, well, what do you think? What's your take? What would you do? Right? And people start to notice like, oh, I don't need to come. He's not just going to tell me what he thinks. Like, he's going to ask me what I think is best. And usually I just go with it. Unless like I have a strong opinion otherwise, I just go with it. And then they feel like, oh, like, wow, he's kind of giving me the reins to go and do this. And oh, this is good. I'd kind of forgotten about this. But I've actually gone through and we've built manifestos for each department, each team. And I call it like, we have a product manifesto, a customer success manifesto. We're working on a sales manifesto. Even our DevOps guy has like a manifesto, and it's like, here are kind of the North Star principles, and kind of the guardrails of like, this is what we're trying to accomplish, and these are the end goals, and like, let's try to work within these boundaries basically. And so everyone, like our head of product, when I brought him on and like handed that over to him, it's like, he doesn't really come to me with a lot of stuff, because he's like, I'm just working within the manifesto. And that's empowered him to feel ownership and be able to make decisions, and feel trusted. Exactly. Yep. But also for me, it frees up a lot of my time, because if everyone's coming to me with all of these questions, it makes us extremely unproductive, and it's hard to move fast. And as a startup, you have to move fast. So I've found, just like by providing these simple guidelines and rules and letting these amazing people go and do, you just get so much work done. Everyone's happy. Everyone feels trusted and empowered and stuff. So.
No, that's awesome. And as you think about building and putting together a manifesto, it takes time and thought. And as you mentioned, we don't really have the core values that we want fleshed out yet, but having that input from your team and those manifestos as guidelines, I think will be an amazing framework for you. I can't wait to hear about what some of those core values are that inspire you the most. Are there core values from other companies that really inspire you? Maybe that's let me put one question before there. What company inspires you the most? And are there core values that stand out to you?
I really like, from a culture perspective, HubSpot. And, if you're familiar,
they do an amazing job.
They have this like culture code, they call it. And it's this deck of like 100 slides or something that goes through like, this is HubSpot, this is how we work, these are our core values. It's actually where I stole the use your best judgment. That's one of the things that they kind of teach in there that I thought was amazing. So I think modeling off of them and how they do culture is really cool. We're a power user of theirs too, which is kind of fun. As far as other examples, I think one of them is like continuous learning that we preach a lot. Being 1% better, like let's strive to be 1% better every day. And then like the owner's mentality, like everything you do, like you're accountable for and you own. And like to our dev team, right? Like in our sprint reviews, we have them demo everything that they built every other week.
That's
and they're able to walk us through every new button and everything that happens. And it gives them that sense of pride of like showing off their work. It's kind of this show and tell thing, which I think is a cool thing that our head of product implemented.
Yeah, that's awesome. And that's how, when we were talking about ownership a minute ago, that's a great way, right? When you have to demonstrate or show, not only to your team, here's what we've been working on, here's what we've been building, but most importantly, you have to show up for your customers, your clients that you've been building and investing for to build them. You talked early on about building people. And I love this idea. I think we've talked a lot about that. As you think about building people, what comes to mind?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it's knowing first, it's trying to get to know them on like a genuine, like human level and like building a friendship and like caring about them. I think that's number one.
Yeah.
Is like, you got to care about them and love them for who they are. And once you do that, it's figuring out like what motivates them, what drives them, what gets them excited. Some people are money motivated. Some people aren't motivated by money, right? And there's a lot of different things that motivate people, right? But also figuring out, like starting with the end in mind, like where do they want to be in 10 years in their career, in 20 years, and in the next 3 years? Because if you don't have that roadmap, like you're going to stop them on that path, right? You're going to kind of derail them from their trajectory. So I think you need to understand like where they want to go and where they want to end up. And if this vehicle that is your company can get them there, or at least get them to the next step. And for me, it's like if our people have this amazing experience at Nectar, they add a ton of new skills, they make themselves more valuable in the workforce, and they go get a better offer somewhere at like in a better position. It's like, I'm going to be so happy for them. Like, it's going to suck to lose them. Absolutely. But to me, it's more about like these friendships and relationships. That's really all we have when it comes down to it. Like everything else is really fleeting, but building these relationships and truly caring about somebody and trying to help make them successful by trusting them and empowering them. It's just, I think it's really fun, and it's really gratifying too.
Yeah.
It's that belief capital too, of like putting belief in them, knowing that they have extremely high potential, and then it helps them believe in themselves, and you're trying to like give them this opportunity to kind of take that and run with it.
That's so inspiring, Trevor, because as you think about it, what do we really have, right? As you talk about team members becoming 1% better, being better, it's our knowledge and our relationships that mean the most to us, right? Because I remember being really excited about new technology several years ago, right? And it's outdated, but relationships that I have from several years ago still mean so much to me. And which goes back to kind of where we started at the very beginning. People may copy, people may try to do this, or, hey, we just launched this feature. Oh, we did too. But the team and really investing in them is really what lasts, you know, forever. That's super inspiring.
And just to throw one more thing out there on that is like, you need to see your people as not your employee or the person that all they ever do is work for your company. Right. That's their life. That's who they are. I think we need to have this more holistic view of like, we're just one small element of their overall life.
Yep.
And they spend a lot of time with us and for us. But just if you think of it more holistically and like really care about every part of their life, their hobbies and, you know, what they want to do and their goals and their families, like they can tell if you actually care.
That's right.
And when they can tell that, you have their hearts and minds, and you can help them more, achieve greatness, and they can also help you more. And it's this beautiful, like, symbiotic relationship.
Yeah. And people talk about that too, Trevor, and they may say, yeah, that sounds awesome in paper, but you've probably seen that and experienced that. I've seen that and experienced it.
Yeah,
and,
totally.
And the degree to which you are deliberate in putting resources towards making that a reality, you're exactly right. It's amazing what will happen when you care so much and all of a sudden you see someone else caring so much because you've empowered them to do so and you trust them to do so. That's so awesome. You were talking about big goals, and I love what Jim Collins says about big, hairy, audacious goals. What are some of yours?
Yeah, I mean, that shifts a lot, right? Especially because your mindset shifts as you grow. It grows with you. And so there were times where it's like, we want to be a $10 million business. And then it's like, as you like get to a certain point, you're like, wow, that was like a really small goal of mine. That right. Sounds bad. I don't know how to put that, but yeah, it always is evolving, right? And I think it shifts a lot. But for us, at the moment, right, we want to be able to impact like hundreds of thousands of users, right? And right now we have like 70,000 users, but it's like, how do we?
That's awesome.
How do we
Congrats,
get
by
to?
The way.
Thank
That's
you.
Not an easy feat.
It's crazy. Yeah, it's been a long journey. It's like, how can we impact like millions of people and really change the world in the sense that we want to create a world where people are happier, healthier, and more fulfilled because of work, not like in spite of work, right? So yeah, we have like pretty high like revenue goals, and that's great. Growth goals, but also just this feeling of like making somewhat of a dent in the universe is really exciting. And yeah,
that's awesome. And everyone has goals, but it's how you go about them.
Yeah. And
how you measure and how you recognize and reward and connect with your team and with your partners.
Yeah.
Right. And other companies that you work with to inspire them. I love that. I've been super inspired today, just talking to you, thinking about how we're all builders, we're all creators. We all have the opportunity to make some small dent in the universe.
Yeah.
Right. And I always say, and I think my team gets so tired of it, it's small things multiplied by time that equal the biggest results. Right. And a lot of times as we're starting out, as we talked about trailblazers at the very beginning, we see the pictures, we see the highlight reel, right? We see the top of the summit. We're like, oh my gosh, I want to be there. And then we start out of that summit. You're like, this is a lot steeper, a lot rockier, a lot harder than I thought it would be. You don't see a lot of pictures there during that journey. But that's really what helps not only craft the character, but you find whose hearts and minds are in it to get to the top, which makes that journey that much better.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, and going back to the goals piece, like I'm big on like the processes versus goals. Like goals set the direction, but it's the processes and the small things, like you kind of said, that like get you there. And looking back, like I've set a million goals in my life and for business that like ended up either totally flopping or we like surpassed whatever goal it was, which is exciting. But the one consistent thing is like the process and like how you wake up every day and like the work that you do. And the question I try to ask myself is like, if I did what I did today for the next 5, 10, 20 years, like where does that lead me? And if it doesn't lead me very far for that day, it's like, okay, how can I change something for tomorrow that if I stay consistent on, it's going to have this compound effect, right? And so for us, like we recently just hit like kind of our BHAG, our big, hairy, audacious goal. We hit that in October, and it's something we've worked towards since we started, right? And so now it's like, okay, what's the next one that we need to set, and what are the processes, and who are the team members we need to get on to like go out and make it happen, right?
How did you celebrate that? And did you?
That's a good question. It's one of those things where it happens, and I don't know if this is a good analogy, but it's like when you turn 16 or 21, where it's like I can go buy dry ice or whatever, and like your life doesn't like actually change much, even though like you fought so hard to get there. We did that night, my wife and I did the crumble cookies. We had it delivered.
Oh, that's
and
amazing.
We decided like anytime we hit certain milestones, that's going to be like what we do. It's just like a fun little thing. It's funny, our investor, Mark Newman, his thing is, I'm sure he's fine with me telling this, but he goes to Del Taco and he has this I can't remember the order, but it's a very specific order. And like, he's achieved like just incredible things in his career, things that most people will never even like think about being able to do. And I just love it that him and his wife sometimes will go to Del Taco. I've caught him on the phone before and I'm like, what are you up to? He's like, I'm at Del Taco. I'm like, what did you accomplish? What did you just do?
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. But for our team, we ended up doing, we went to Tucanos as a team to celebrate, and had like spouses and everybody come. And so that was really fun.
That's awesome. What brings you the most joy right now?
For me, I mean, the obvious, just like everybody else, I think, right, is family. I think it's this kind of family and relationship. So my wife and son, and we have baby girl on the way in a couple months. So we're really excited about that. So spending time with them, being with them brings me a ton of joy, as well as, and then Nectar, right? Building this team and building this company and seeing the growth happen and planning for how to like take it to the next level and learn way more things. 'Cause, as a founder, you're constantly having to like upskill and like try to learn faster than the growth of your company. You have to like stay ahead of it. And that brings me a lot of joy too, is just like trying to figure stuff out. So those are like the two main things that bring me joy.
That's awesome. Well, I've certainly been inspired many times throughout this conversation and so grateful you'd take your time from running a company and coming and sharing these stories. As you think about, what would you tell yourself starting this, 5-6 years ago, or to you and to your friend, your brother that were painting, the bottom of citrus trees in Arizona.
Yeah.
Right. What would you share? What advice, thoughts would you share with this, the rising generation, to help inspire them?
Yeah. I think if you want to be a trailblazer, like get started, start somewhere. I think what cripples people is they feel like they have to have this big idea and everything has to be fleshed out and they have to figure out a cool name for their company and a cool logo before they start and all of that, right? But I think it's just like get your feet wet in something. And that's what I've seen, right? Like at first it was car detailing. I could very well still be doing that, right? And there would be nothing wrong with it.
Yeah.
But then seeing software and like the scalability and everything that you can do and like the inherent value of a software company versus like a service-based business, for example, it's like just start somewhere, get your feet wet, get out of the textbook and do something and like work on pivoting and like trying to upgrade as you go and just be very iterative and resilient about it, right? And the beauty of, I'm going to put another plug in for software is I think most products, it's like you're trying to fit the square peg into the round hole a lot of times. And when it's like a physical product like that, it's really hard to iterate on and it makes things really slow. But with software, you can evolve and you can make tweaks and changes and you can shave it off so that you're fitting a square peg into a square hole, right? So yeah, that's what I would say.
That's awesome. Trevor, it has been so awesome. Thanks again for spending some time with us today and blessing those who will have the opportunity to listen to this and be inspired by your journey. Again, I think you're a true example of what you talk about, right? Being 1% better, being, educating yourself, looking for opportunities. And I would say looking for opportunities to build not only a great company, great processes, but your building of people, right? And building software that blesses people's lives has been super inspiring to me. So thanks so much for joining us today on the Lemonade Stand Stories podcast.
Really appreciate you having me. It's been an absolute pleasure and a blast, honestly. It's been fun to just talk shop a little bit with you. So
for sure.
Thanks, Derek.
Yeah, you bet.
Thanks so much for listening to the Lemonade Stand podcast, and we hope you enjoyed this episode. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast on whatever platform you use to be alerted when we release new episodes. We'd also love to hear your feedback in the reviews, and if you or someone you know has an awesome Lemonade Stand story, please reach out to us on social media and let us know.